During the creation of television, we began to see the trends that led to today. Television was easy to turn on and would distract the kids. If you were a busy parent and didn't want to worry about your kids, you could just let some cartoons play and just forget about them. Fred Rogers was ahead of the game in seeing the effect that this would have on our culture. He recognized that if television was going to be tasked with raising a generation, it would be best if the storytellers were teaching the right lessons.
You do that? Could you explain what your job is?
Would they know about television?
Yeah, they would know about television maybe.
Mm-hmm. I would just say that I'm a man who talks with children on television and helps them to feel as good as possible about themselves and about the people that they meet.
A wrinkle in this plan lied in the fact that excitement sells. Loud noises and violence catches our attention. Attention is our most valuable asset, above anything else. And what was being shown was appealing to the lowest common denominator.
I end the program by saying, you've made this day a special day by just your being you. There's no person in the whole world like you, and I like you just the way you are. And I feel that if we in public television can only make it clear that feelings are mentionable and manageable, we will have done a great service for mental health. I think that it's much more dramatic that two men could be working out their feelings of anger, much more dramatic than showing something of gunfire. I'm constantly concerned about what our children are seeing. And for 15 years I have tried in this country and Canada to present what I feel is a meaningful expression of care.
As you can probably guess, Fred Rogers' project was an uphill battle. His project was to develop a program that would meet his vision. A program whose purpose was not to garner the attention of children at all costs, but to cultivate the next generation to be shaped by morals, like the common human respect and how to properly manage emotions.
Could I tell you the words of one of the songs which I feel is very important?
Yes.
What do you do with the mad that you feel when you feel so mad you could bite? When the whole wide world seems oh so wrong and nothing you do seems very right? What do you do? Do you punch a bag? Do you pound some clay or some dough? Do you round up friends for a game of tag or see how fast you go? It's great to be able to stop when you've planned a thing that's wrong and be able to do something else instead and think this song. I can stop when I want to, can stop when I wish, can stop, stop, stop anytime. And what a good feeling to feel like this and know that the feeling is really mine. Know that there's something deep inside that helps us become what we can. For a girl can be someday a lady, and a boy can be someday a man.
I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful.
It's important to also note the strategy that Fred Rogers employed. He was not going to try and get television bans or to censor children's programs. But the task before him was to use the very technology that could easily be blamed as the problem and use it to create a solution. My goal here is not to cover the history of this conflict, but to consider this as a microcosm of the larger movement of the culture. When I consider the role of television at this time, it's hard not to see this as the seed of what would lead to what we call the iPad baby phenomenon.
I want to rethink that strategy.
This is what happens when mom and dad take away an iPad from 2-year-old Ashlyn Brooks.
I would argue that the issue we are seeing is not the overuse of screens, but the content on those screens. This to me seems to be the root of the issue. If content was not so addictive, there would be no concern with overuse. However, in the last few years, we've seen almost all entertainment optimized to be as addictive and attention-consuming as possible. The response that Mr. Rogers produced was a show that flew in the face of conventional wisdom. It was slow and methodical. He would give puppet shows and write music to fit the message of the given episode. On one episode even, he sat for 1 minute straight to teach the viewers how long a minute was. He enjoyed the gifts of silence.
I'm very concerned that our society is much more interested in information than wonder, in noise rather than silence. How do we do that? I mean, in our business, yours and mine, how do we encourage reflection? I trust that this book will do some of that, but oh my, this is a noisy world.
The message behind Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was personalism. In order to make the world a better place, it would have to begin in the personal realm. Fred Rogers used his program to teach children how to love others well. He refused to speak down to anyone and gave each person two very important things: his respect and attention.
Helping kids deal with their anger, acknowledging it instead of telling them that they shouldn't feel it. And it was like, this speaks to me. I'm very angry. I'm very scared. Even as a young adult, like this, it didn't feel like a kid's program. It felt very profound. Within about 2 weeks or so, I was at the school paper and I got into the elevator to go down to the lobby, and the doors open, and standing there is Mr. Rogers himself. I turned around and said, like, look, I just want to tell you how much you mean to me. And he said, he didn't say like, thank you, I appreciate that or anything. He was just like, oh, did you grow up as one of my television neighbors? Like, just the way he said it was so sweet. I was like, yes, yeah, I was your neighbor. And he opens his arms and he's like, it's great to see you again, neighbor. And he just gives me this big hug, and it felt so wonderful to meet him, but also to literally be embraced by Mr. Rogers, this kind man.
I'll be back when the day is new.
And he sat down and he said, would you like to tell me what it was that's upsetting you? And just the way he said that, too, is so indicative of Mr. Rogers. He didn't say, oh, what was bothering you? He said, would you like to tell me? And I did. And it helped so much just to have someone to talk to. It wasn't just a persona that he put on to this program. The program grafted itself onto his personality, his real soul, his real heart.
A common shared experience among those who met Mr. Rogers states that when he spoke to you, you felt like you were the subject of his full attention. There was nothing more important to him than his conversation partner.
Because I see that people who are not the fancy people in this world are the ones who seem to nourish my soul. And I want to learn how to be the best receiver that I can ever be, because I think graceful receiving is one of the most wonderful gifts we can give anybody. If we receive what somebody gives us in a graceful way, we've given that person, I think, a wonderful gift.
This is why I hold Fred Rogers in such high regard. He was fully himself and strived to be the best version of that man. He taught me what it means to love others well, and in a way that encourages them to be themselves in a way that best supports the community around them. I hope that someday I can be a neighbor of his caliber. To close this out, I have a clip from the channel Griswold Grimm, where Grimm tells a story that captures the very phenomena that Rogers was trying to address.
With this enchanting newcomer, and soon invited him to live with our family. The stranger was quickly accepted and was around to welcome me into the world a few months later. As I grew up, I never questioned his place in our family. Mom taught me to love the Word of God. Dad taught me to obey it. But the stranger was our storyteller. He could weave the most fascinating tales. Adventures, mysteries, and comedies were daily conversations. He could hold our whole family spellbound for hours each evening. He was like a friend to the whole family. He took Dad, Bill, and me to our first Major League Baseball game. He was always encouraging us to see the movies, and he even made arrangements to introduce us to several movie stars. The stranger was an incessant talker. Dad didn't seem to mind, but sometimes Mom would quietly get up, while the rest of us were enthralled with one of his stories of faraway places, and go to her room, read her Bible, and pray. I wonder now if she ever prayed that the stranger would leave. You see, my dad ruled our household with certain moral convictions, but the stranger never felt an obligation to honor them. Profanity, for example, was not allowed in our house, not from us, from our friends, or adults. Our longtime visitor, however, used occasional four-letter words that burned my ears and made Dad squirm. To my knowledge, the stranger was never confronted. My dad was a teetotaler who didn't permit alcohol in his home, not even for cooking. But the stranger felt he needed exposure and enlightened us to other ways of life. He offered us beer and other alcoholic beverages often. He made cigarettes look tasty, cigars manly, and pipes distinguished. He talked freely, too freely, about sex. His comments were sometimes blatant, sometimes suggestive, and generally embarrassing. I know now that my early concepts of the man-woman relationship were influenced by the stranger. As I look back, I believe it was the grace of God that the stranger did not influence us more. Time after time he opposed the values of my parents, yet he was seldom rebuked and never asked to leave. More than 30 years have passed since the stranger moved in with the young family on Morningside Drive. But if I were to walk into my parents' den today, you would still see him over in a corner, waiting for someone to listen to him, talk, and watch him draw his pictures. His name? We always called him Set. Television set.
Thank you all for sticking around to the end, and I hope you have an amazing day. I'll see you all later.
Are we finished?
Yeah.
Because this is what I always play at the end of any studio day.